Hi guys, I hope you're doing well. It's Monday, April 20th, and I was just going to review Unit 2. I'm not reviewing the whole unit today. I'm going to kind of break up the next 4 weeks with us and try to do 2 units a week. And this PowerPoint is just like snapshots of the heavy hitters in this unit. So again, it's not like the total unit, but we went through the total unit way back. So these are just like review on big concepts that I think might be on the exam. So it's definitely not a comprehensive review on each unit, but I think that I'm doing the heavy hitters kind of like everybody else in my AP Psych blog that I kind of follow. We're all kind of doing these same concepts because again, it's all FRQ writing for the test. Okay, so I'm going to review part of Unit 2 today, and then I'm going to review the rest of it on, I guess, Wednesday, because today's Monday. I don't see you tomorrow. I'll see you Wednesday. So we'll do Unit 2 today and Wednesday, and then Unit 3, the bio unit, we'll do that Thursday and Friday. And I'm going to just have like short little FRQ writing assignments for those days as well. Okay. Again, don't hesitate to reach out if you have questions about the FRQ or the exam. I am going to try to put together like a little short maybe video on like the test because I've done so many webinars now and I kind of know, I feel like I know exactly what's going to be on it. So I'm going to try to do that maybe this week. Okay. Anyways, Unit 2. This is research methods. And so again, you know that psychology is a science, and it's a science because, we can research, we know things. Psychology is a science because it's, not really what we study, but how we study it. And we study it through research methods. Okay. Oh, and I put that in here. How quaint is that? How fun is that? Okay, so psychology is considered a science, not because what we study, but how we study it. So through research methods in psychology, we can study and find, correlations. We can find relationships between data, and we can find cause and effect relationships. Okay, and keep in mind, remember, there's the 3 types of research studies that are correlational research. Remember, correlation does not equal causation. So through the 3 types of research for correlational data, that's where you're trying to find like relationships between 2 events or 2 things. So again, it doesn't prove like cause and effect. It just proves that there could be like a relationship with it. Okay, and the 3 types of research studies with that is naturalistic observation, case studies, and surveys. The only way you can find cause and effect relationships, don't forget that this is so important, it's just through doing experiments. That's the only way in psychology that you can find a true cause and effect relationship. It's by actually doing an experiment. Okay, so we'll go into that in a little bit. Okay, so surveys, this is the most common way to collect data. And basically what they're doing is it's this written or online now questionnaire. It just can answer research questions. Okay, so it's really easy, it's quick. You're able to grab a lot of data in a quick way. So advantages, it's cheap, easy to administer. You can look at multiple variables at once. And then disadvantages with this is questions could be poorly worded, or people might misinterpret questions. So there might just be some not sure what they're asking. It's just, you have to really make sure that your questions are framed in a way that participants know, what you're asking. Okay, and it does provide a little bit of just shallow information, so it doesn't give you like the whole big picture. And again, it doesn't prove causation. So you can't say from a survey that, this increases this or whatever. You just can find a little relationship in that. Okay. All right. So naturalistic, oh wait, did I miss one? Oh yeah, here we go. Naturalistic observation. So surveys is the first type. Naturalistic observation, that's where researchers are just watching participants in their usual routine or their familiar environment. And they're often watching them without them knowing that they're being watched. Okay, so the researcher doesn't interfere at all with people or whoever they're observing. They might be observing animals at the zoo. And this is because of that Hawthorne effect. And this is where, if you know you're being watched, you're going to do things a little bit differently, possibly, right? If you know you're being studied in a bathroom, washing your hands after you go to the bathroom, you're going to wash your hands after you go to the bathroom, right? Because you know you're being observed. You should always, especially now. So you know that if you know a coach is watching you, you're a soccer player and you're trying to get recruited. If you know a soccer coach, a college coach is coming to watch you, you're going to be like on your best behavior because you know someone's watching you. So that the naturalistic observation is where people don't know that they're being observed in an environment. Okay, so an advantage of that is you get some real good data and you get some real good observation on behavior. But disadvantages, you might not get what you think you're studying. So if a researcher comes to Morris Catholic to study behaviors of high school students, and it's a day where we have like a pep rally and kids are not in uniform because it's a spirit day, they're not going to get like a true day where, what a true day of a high school student is. Does that make sense? A disadvantage too is you don't have any control. And again, this one, it doesn't prove causality. So it doesn't prove that, this causes this. That can only be done with an experiment. Okay. The other method in correlational research are case studies. And we talked a little bit about this really early on with like Kitty Genovese. It's like you're deeply investigating one or maybe a few unusual cases. Okay, so we talked about Clive Wearing. Remember, he had that anterior great amnesia. People studied Phineas Gage and that accident that he had. So that was a case study. Kim Peek is the Rain Man. You watched a little video about him, but they studied him because he was an unusual case. Okay, so it's like just studying like one person or a small group of people that have a certain characteristic you want to study. Advantages is it really digs deep and it finds possible relationships or ideas that could eventually then turn into a hypothesis and that you could maybe do an experiment on. And it's like the true opposite of a survey, where survey is just very surfacey. And I said it was kind of shallow because you can't really follow up in a survey. The participants just read the questions and they assume and they just do it, where, a case study, you can really dig deep and dive deep into the relationship or ideas in that. Okay. Disadvantages of a case study, it's very, very long and time consuming. And you're really not able to generalize on a population. Like you can't generalize from studying one or two high school students for across the board. This is going to be how it is with all high school students. So you can't generalize. And again, you can't prove that cause and effect with that. So again, don't forget the three research methods are case study, survey, and naturalistic observation. And that's for correlational research. And that's where they're trying to find these variables that have a relationship. It's super important to operationally define anything that you're going to research. So, you have to have a good operational definition of what it is you're studying and how it is you're going to study it. And that's really, you have to have that for any research that you're doing. So it exists so that researchers can replicate the research or the experiment so that it remains the same research and the same experiment. Okay, so it states how you'll measure if you're doing like a happiness study. What do you have to define happiness? Is it how many smiles? Is it how much laughter? Is it how your mouth curls up at when you hear something? Like you have to define like what happiness is or what your attitude is or intelligence, or if you're studying high school students now with online learning, you have to define like what that looks like for the people. Okay, so that's super important. And then there's these two things like longitudinal studies and cross-sectional studies. They're not actually research methods, but they're ways to frame or do your research. Okay, so longitudinal studies, we've talked a little bit about this over the course of the year. Remember that movie we watched, Three Identical Strangers? That was a longitudinal study. They looked at those people over that long period of time, those triplets, right? The movie Boyhood, they studied that boy, and they did his whole development over 15 years of his lifespan. What else was a longitudinal study? Terman's study, where he studied those higher IQ people for many years. That's a longitudinal study. Okay, and that compares research over time. Okay, so advantages of this is it uncovers confounding variables that can be used in a variety of research studies. Disadvantages, it's very time consuming. Okay, and it's expensive, and it's also very difficult to control. Okay, so longitudinal, like, do you see long? So you want to think like longitudinal, long, over a long period of time. Get it? Okay. This is so hard because I can't use mnemonics in my slides. It's very difficult. I'm missing Prezi, but Prezi takes so long, so I was trying to do these quick little reviews for you. Another one to be considerate of with talking about research is cross-sectional research. So this isn't, again, like longitudinal, where it's not a research method per se, but it compares like two groups at once. Okay, so it compares, like, if we were going to study high school students, are they more effective online, or are they more effective in school? You could do that like right now, right? Because I think that there's still countries that have kids in school right now, high school students. You could like take those kids, and then you could take like us, and you could see, how are they doing with a teacher, without a teacher, online versus not online. So those would be like a cross-sectional research, and it's comparing groups, and it's comparing groups now over a shorter period of time. Okay, so advantages, it can be used with other research methods like, case studies, surveys, all that. The disadvantage of this is it's only like a snapshot, and it's not like a moving picture. So like if your parents were to look in PowerSchool like right now, and let's say you didn't do well on an AP Psych test, they would see that, but they would just see it at today's date. They wouldn't see it like at the end of the quarter when all things are considered. Do you know what I'm saying? So that's where it can be not as relevant, because it's just a snapshot at the time. Okay, so let me talk about, just want to make sure I'm getting all these cross-sectional. Okay, so with these correlational methods, so there's going to be a positive correlation and then a negative correlation. And remember this from when we studied this way back. So the positive correlation, you're going to have two variables are going to increase together, right? They're going to go in the same direction. So they're going to increase together, they're going to decrease together. So more calories you consume, the more your weight goes up, right? The more you study for a test, the higher grade you're going to get. Those are variables that increase together. Negative correlation is when two variables move in opposite directions. So if you climb a mountain, you're going to increase in height, but that's going to get colder, so the temperature is going to go down. Okay, so that's super important to remember with correlation. Okay, so on to experimental methods. So this is the only way you can determine a cause and effect relationship with your experiment or your research you're doing. So with an experimental method, you can take this hypothesis, which is this prediction. If students compare sugar, then they'll be more hyperactive, right? That's when you're going to find if there's this cause and effect relationship. Did sugar cause them to be hyperactive? Did caffeine make them hyper? Whatever it is you're studying, it's that if then relationship, okay? And this is really important too with the independent versus the dependent variable. I'm positive that there's going to be something like this on the FRQ, especially because one whole FRQ is research method. So I'm almost positive that you're going to have to figure out what's an independent or a dependent. So please know this. So if a student, see the I in if, that is your independent variable. What are you putting in the cup? Remember my Prezi, what you're putting in the cup. So it's the treatment. So it's something the researcher does. They give you, they manipulate, they assign treatment, like whatever they're doing. So whatever is manipulated in the experiment, that is the independent variable. Okay, what you're putting in the cup. Okay, so the treatment. And then the dependent variable is the result. So it's something the researcher gets, or what they're measuring out of the experiment. Okay, so hyperactivity then would be the dependent variable. And then you have those confounding variables. Those are things, those like lurking variables that sometimes kind of come up, like weather, and that could cause some bias in there. So it's these things that might affect the result of the dependent variable, because what you're trying to find is this causality. That's the goal, right? It's, only this can happen in the experiment, that it's making it the cause and effect relationship. Okay, so the IV, the independent variable alone, caused the change in the dependent variable. Okay, and then these are just things to keep in mind. When you're looking at doing that true experiment, you're going to have this experimental group, right? That is the group that is going to get your treatment. So it's going to get the independent variable. So it's going to get that special treatment. And then you have the control group, that non-special treatment, and they get the placebo. They don't get it, okay? And remember, the placebo is that sugar pill that they don't get that they don't get the actual like pill. They'd get a sugar pill, but they think they might get the pill, but it's just the placebo. It doesn't do anything. And then the other two things to keep in mind and to make sure you understand is the single blind experiment. That is when a participant doesn't know which group they're in. So if I'm in this study, looking at the effects of coffee, right? I'm going to get the same cup of coffee, but I don't know if it's a decaf cup of coffee or a regular cup of coffee, but I feel the effects. So I think I'm in the experimental group, but I might not be. I might have gotten the decaf coffee. So I don't know what I'm in, but the researcher does know what group I'm in. Okay. And then there's the double blind. And this is to kind of reduce the bias and reduce those confounding variables. That double blind, neither the researcher nor the participant, no one knows what group they're in. Okay. And remember, this was, we talked about this with Grey's Anatomy, right? That was a double blind experiment when Meredith, like, they weren't supposed to know who was getting the Alzheimer's treatment. And then she moved that guy's wife in there, remember? So that's double blind. So neither researcher nor participant know which group that they're in. Okay, and then you have to randomly sample. Like, so when you're ready to do your experiment, you have to make sure that you're randomly sampling from the larger population. So everybody has a chance to get in, your experiment that you're doing. And then you take this representative sample where, you get a selection from the larger population that accurately reflects the total population. So if you were doing something like, a study from high school students, you would have to make sure that you gave, high school students every opportunity to get into your study. And then, then you'd get it even more representative, where you might take, make sure that you have a certain percentage of, males and females, or, whatever it is. You just want to make sure the representative sample is this selection from that larger population that reflects the total population. Okay, so those are kind of confusing. And then once you have your random sample and your representative sample, you've made sure you've done all that, then you have to assign these people to groups. So this was assignment. So you put their butts into a group. So that's the difference between random assignment and random sample. Is assignment, you're actually putting your people now in a group, and you have to do it very randomly. Like, you can't just pick all the tall people for your basketball study or whatever you're doing. You need to randomly assign them. So you can do roll the dice, you can do a number generator, every other person, numbers, whatever it is, you have to do it randomly, and that assigns them to the experimental group or the control group. Okay. really quickly, ethical issues. We've talked about these a couple different times. Don't forget that APA is the American Psychological Association, and they make those guidelines, and they have this IRB, this Institutional Review Board, that approves any experiments that you want to do. So all those unethical experiments we talked about in the beginning of the year, this was way before the APA had an IRB review board, and they did that because of some of those crazy experiments. So now they have these guidelines, and you have to go through the IRB. You have to go through this review board to get your research, your experiments approved. Okay, and so APA guidelines, they have to have informed consent. Subjects must know what's being studied. You really have to protect your participants for sure from any harm or discomfort. There has to be limited deception, and if there is deception, remember you have to debrief, because they have to leave the research in the state that they came into, okay? And then they have the right to decline, to be a participant at any time. Like they can say, I don't want to be part of this anymore, I want to be out. Confidentiality. So those are all like main things in research. Okay. Awesome. Okay, guys, I'm going to do statistics on Wednesday, just a quick, that'll be a lot shorter. I'm so sorry, this was 20 minutes. So if you have questions about any of this that we talked about, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'll have a short little FRQ for you guys to do. And then, hopefully we can like maybe do some small group work closer to the AP exam where like, I don't know, however you guys want to do. Maybe you should shoot me an email if you would want to get together and do some like Google Chat stuff, if that would help. We can certainly do that. Okay, take care.